Hello, everybody. This is Monica Paolini from Senza Fili, and I have a pleasure to talk today to Jason Hoffman at MobiledgeX, where he is the CEO. And this is a continuation of a conversation we've been having now for a few years with Jason. So it's a good time to get an update on what's happening on everything about edge. So, Jason, we've talked about this before, but where
Mm,
is the edge? Um,
mm.
we know it's there. Where is it?
It's great. This is great question. And I think there's two pretty sort of common ways of thinking about it that have emerged now. One thing we can talk about is what isn't edge. So we know that the smartphone that's in your hand and that sort of world of devices it's a bunch of devices, and it's not the edge. There's a sufficient name and way of thinking about those, that exist. It's also pretty clear that, there's three major public cloud providers, which is Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. We know what public cloud is. And then when I say edge, there's two ways of thinking about it. One being that edge is everything that's in between public clouds and mobile devices. So whether that be access sites, core sites, transport sites, those infrastructure assets inside of there, this idea that there's maybe hundreds of public cloud sites, but there's hundreds of thousands of other potential locations in between those public clouds and devices. So those infrastructure assets tend to be within traditional mobile operators, sort of largely in there. And that's definitely one area of what is edge. And I think it's in some ways, the analog of public edge. Now, there's also private edge, and we're finding now that edge is being used as a word in the enterprise to describe everything that is not public cloud or SaaS. So it's like, so most people have a SaaS strategy, a public cloud strategy, and now they have an edge strategy. And edge, oddly enough, refers to everything that makes sense not to go to the public cloud or be in a SaaS solution. And so it's one of those semi-ironic definitions of enterprise edge that if you take it to the full extent, it includes your mainframe strategy, things like that. But we find that edge is being used in that sort of public edge, private edge, telco edge, enterprise edge. Those seem to be really sort of the two definitions that have emerged out of it. And it's either, all those telco assets that sit between mobile devices and public clouds, or, essentially all the infrastructure assets and other things that make sense to stay in a specific location.
Right. So we're now talking about the what is it, the edge cloud or the cloud edge, which a lot of people talk about, which I personally find very confusing because they're very two very different concepts that are both helpful and they help each other. You need both.
Yeah, yeah.
So can you give us a little bit of what is your view in terms of what is that you need the cloud, the centralized cloud, and where is it you need the edge?
Well, so I think, and again, like this previous thing we just talked about, just like how there's public cloud and private cloud, there's public edge and private edge. And, those sort of concepts are emerging. And when you think of this idea that you have, and I don't, I always have a bias against being networking centric in any descriptions, because I feel that a lot of networking people get too networking centric and they make it too much about the network, and saying things like the network is the computer is really semi-offensive, really, I mean, because it's not. But we can use it as sort of a way to think about it, right? So we know that there's the internet, and the internet is, of course, a global network that no one really owns, that we're all connected on, and it has certain characteristics. Now, when you head into mobile networks that have emerged over really the last, 15, 20 years, when you really sort of look at these being for something other than just voice calls, when you look at mobile networks are country-specific private networks that consume a government-owned asset class called spectrum. And since most of us are going towards mobile wireless, devices, then you really have your device connected to a mobile network connected to the internet. Now, the internet's not going to go away, and mobile networks are not going to go away. These two networks will stay two networks, and they have different characteristics for like fundamental reasons of physics and the way that we've structured the governments of this world, right? So, we have, these two things. Public clouds are compute and data resources embedded in the internet. And when you're embedded in something, you inherit the characteristics of what you're embedded in. Edge is compute and data resources embedded in mobile networks, and it inherits those same sort of characteristics of it. And when we say that, we've been trying to do the last couple of years is say, oh, well, we have the right to exist, that mobile networks exist, the internet exists, public cloud emerged as these resources embedded in the internet. Edge needs to emerge as these resources embedded in mobile networks. These two things will exist side to side. And so then the question becomes, to date, Edge hasn't existed. So everybody's gotten by with, I'll put my thing on a device, I'll just get mobile connectivity, and then I'll use these compute and data resources embedded in the internet called public clouds. And now we're saying that there's another thing next to that where you can do things on the device. You can also use the edge, the compute and data resources embedded in the mobile infrastructure, and then you use cloud too. And the sort of question of device plus cloud, or do I use device plus edge plus cloud, really comes down to a pretty simple question for me. And that is, do you have a need to do location specific computing or data for any aspect of your application? The second, being in a known location is important to you, then edge becomes important to you. And that can either be for some existing, applications, or it can be new applications. And it can be for performance reasons, to data sovereignty reasons, to regulatory, to privacy, to a whole range of reasons why. But for us, what we've sort of thought of is you have this device plus edge plus cloud, and then what sits on top of it is really more of a concept like location specific computing, that knowing exactly where your workload is important to you. And then having that same type of location understanding, just like how having location understanding on the device is important, having that location understanding in the edge is a prerequisite to actually allowing any type of back-end mobility around these things moving to different spots and locations as your customers are moving around.
So let me ask you an example for this. Let's say I'm an enterprise, okay,
Yeah.
and I come to you and say, well, how do I know if I need edge? I've been surviving until now without having much of an edge infrastructure. How do I know I need it?
Well, so the thing is the question becomes, what infrastructure do you have today, and where is it? Do you even sort of like realize what it does for you? And what a lot of people see, what I think a lot of people don't understand about the benefits many enterprises got from the public cloud is moving to the public cloud or doing some things on the public cloud was one of the first times they had a uniform understanding of what they have from an infrastructure standpoint, what it does for them, and how it's related to sort of the business. In some ways, edge is now tackling everything that's been left behind. So why is something still running on a box under somebody's desk? Why do you still have this? Why is this sort of there? What type of, the idea that one builds out even a campus for, your employees, the idea that you're not providing mobile connectivity to those employees would be silly. And then the sort of question of what other sort of resources are present there that support exactly what type of use cases and experiences you have on that campus or in that factory or sort of anything else like that. And so I think, in a lot of ways, edge has to be a unifying concept for really strategically tackling what is that sort of end-to-end experience going to be in that specific sort of location, for whatever it does for the company. It's not, because you hear these other things where there's an IoT over strategy over here, but we have a mobile app strategy this, and then we're sort of doing this. That, a lot of the times when you go through, there may be 3, 4, 5, 6 different, strategic initiatives around transforming this within sort of that. And here we're doing our campus build out, which is different than our IoT thing, which is different from this, which is different from that. Edge, Edge is sort of a unifying concept and structure that allows all of those things to go under, sort of achieve the same type of unifying benefits you have to asking the question of, well, what should go on public cloud, and what do we consume from a SaaS sort of perspective, and what do we sort of want here? Edge is sort of that last frontier of everything that's left in the enterprise space, and if you take a unified approach to it, you're more likely to get it done.
Now, it's really interesting you mentioned a unified approach. So on one end, you go out to the public cloud, centralized cloud, but then on the other hand, the enterprise already has Wi-Fi networks, their own infrastructure there. So it's already they already
Yeah.
have a private network. They already have some sort of edge infrastructure, right?
Yeah, they have corners, and they have corners of
And,
their building
yeah,
where people can't make a phone call, so they go stand in the stairwell, and a lot. I mean,
right.
so if you think about it, even in those, we as enterprises, we tend to provide relatively poor experiences in specific locations. And I think that, how do we provide the best experience to somebody who's on a mobile device in specific locations as a company, is the problem of edge.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the idea is that I guess it's the unifying uh, perspective is that you need to manage the whole thing together,
That's right.
uh, and
That's right.
that's a huge opportunity. It's a different way for the enterprise to look at it.
Right.
But now let me ask you a final question here. I mean, this is a huge change for an enterprise. It's
Yeah.
not just adding the technology, adding a few boxes here and there.
Yeah.
Is the enterprise ready? And how long? I mean, what in terms of timeline? And how quickly are they going to move into this?
Well, I mean, the good news is we have, for me, edge is the next evolution of cloud, to where it's enough of an evolutionary step that we're arguing that it's a separate species, right? So we're literally saying there's public cloudicus over here, and there's public etiquette over there, and you have two different things, but one's evolved from the other. Now, we know how public clouds emerged, private cloud build outs, what content moved to the cloud, what content was created for the cloud, and by say content meaning applications, the idea of hybrid clouds, of how you manage your public and private, the idea of multi-cloud, sort of emerged. And so that public cloud, private cloud, what are cloud native applications, what gets moved to it, what new experiences does it enable, things, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. We can really think of that as public cloud, private cloud, cloud, native cloud content, if you will, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. Well, it turns out there's going to be a public edge, a private edge, native edge content, hybrid edge, and multi-edge. And so the way that cloud is rolled out, really sort of largely over the last 15 years, is a pretty good analog of how edge is going to happen over the next 15 years, in my opinion. So what we'll see is activity now where, on the enterprise side, it's that sort of unifying understanding of edge really allows one to start doing private edge work. At the same time, what we're doing is working with our mobile operators to surface up a public edge in a given spot. A lot of what we're doing in the Seamster initiative and things with other partners of ours is about what type of use cases and these things go on the edge. That's about native edge content in there. And we're over the next, 3 to 5 years, that sort of private edge, public edge, native edge content, what sort of emerges out, and the like. is what's going to be playing out, over, the next 3 to 5 years. And then we'll sort of start heading into things where, in some cases, we already have an enterprise that's going to be working on a private edge in a country and an operator that's building up a public edge in a country. And then, what we're sort of helping with is how do they pick and choose out of both? It's a hybrid edge problem, and then we know that by about 2023 or so, there's going to be at least, two, hopefully three operators in some countries that have some public edge type of approach and how that works with the public cloud in a given country. And that sort of multi-edge, type sort of thing becomes sort of relevant. But I think we just sort of think that really largely from, for me, 2020 up until about 2035 is going to roll out in a pretty similar way to how public clouds emerged, private clouds emerged, what native content sort of shows up and that type of timing, what are hybrid concepts, what are multi concepts, the sort of base desires that showed up in the cloud space and everything else is going to repeat itself, in the edge space. And then edge has the right to exist as a separate species because it solves that fundamental problem of knowing exactly where your stuff is, and allowing you to have that type of true mobility on the back end, just like how we have on the front end.
Yeah. Very really final follow up on this. So can mobile operators and the enterprise, well, can mobile operators found this? So do they have the financial ability to support this and
Yeah.
the interest in doing it? And are the enterprise willing to spend the money and time and effort that
Yeah,
is
I
required?
believe so. The funny thing about edge is it's a little more. Um, um, so right now, operators are spending money on a digital transformation, a customer experience transformation, a transport transformation, a core transformation, an access transformation, and that's what they're all spending money on. If you look at it, if you look at what that is, they're all building an edge and they're putting content on that edge. And then what they're doing is if they do a good job of building that edge and they're running, because if you think about it, edge is not the consequence of these transformations. Edge is what's actually being built. And they're even going to be running their networks on their edge. And then the question being, do we allow third parties to come in and actually function as more of an open ecosystem on the operator side to allow other people to run on our edge too? So I would argue that operators are building an edge today. They're doing it in a very fragmented way. And so there's more than sufficient resources and thinking and everything else to do it. What's been missing is this instead of this idea that we have these six different organizations that are doing six different transformations that have to work in sort of this, and we're going to transition to 5G and everything else. If you just say, well, guess what? 5G is an edge workload. And edge actually is a sufficient concept for every single one of these other transformations that you're doing. It is the unifying sort of transformation concept across these. And so if we start bringing these together in the right way, organizing them to execute in a unified way, there's actually even a lot of cost savings possible within these transformations as a result of having a unified organizational sort of approach on the operator side. And so, I think, for an operator, a lot of ways is doing a quote unquote cloud transformation was never quite, it didn't quite tackle the issue, if you will, but doing an edge transformation that includes all of these sort of work streams in it and really sort of takes the efficiencies up another step, that is a unifying concept, within the operator space. And I think on the same side with the enterprise space, what I see often is here's our public cloud strategy, here's our SaaS strategy, and then here's 9 other strategies sort of like underneath around things. If they take the approach of here's what we're going to use from a SaaS solution perspective, here's what we're going to use from a public cloud perspective, and then here's really what we're going to do from an edge perspective. And everything's going to go on our sort of edge. It's a unifying concept that sort of ties up that sort of idea of everything that is left in that. And that sort of perspective that edge has, that you need to know what's going on and you're going to, at the end of the day, be guaranteeing, an experience, really sort of makes, edge as a unifying concept. It really sort of makes it, something that's been the missing piece to what their overall digital transformation has been. And I think it's not an it's not an extra cost to be more efficient and think about something better. So I think everybody has more than enough resources to do it the right way. They just need to start doing it the right way.
And would you like do you have any final remarks on how important sensor is going to be in all this?
Well, I think for um, MobiledgeX was founded by a mobile operator, right? Like literally a top 5 tier 1 operator. And if you look at um, and myself having been in that space, what I always found in it was that a lot of the internal conversations we have in the mobile operator space is actually about us. Like it's about mobile operators. What's in it for mobile operators? OTTs are doing this to mobile operators. Mobile operators. It's a very and most people when they have conversations about something, they tend to be talking about themselves. When you look at what the problem in Edge was 2 years ago, was really this question of who is it for and what do they need, and can we have some humility on our side to make sure that we deliver that. And this whole idea that for something like Edge to be successful, particularly when it's an initiative that came out of the mobile operator space, it can't be about just mobile operators. It has to be about how we enable everybody to have a common understanding, fit within a value chain, supported in their ability to execute and everything else like that. And so I think, Seamster for us is as critical as any product development we do, sort of around, enabling these types of things. It's really about us saying that, it's not about Deutsche Telekom. It's not about MobiledgeX. It's not about mobile operators. It's about all of us. And this sort of question of, can we go and clearly define things for everybody, have a great sort of framework, and then point out to everybody that this is about expanding, our the potential for all of us, and sort of helping, take these experiences to the next step. We're arguing that we have a lot of learnings from cloud and mobile and that sort of transition that happened in 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that we're sort of proposing that we're going to be going through something similar now. We're trying to make sure that all these lessons from the past and best practices and everything else like that is as widespread as possible, so that we're really doing a good job for the benefit of all of our customers overall.
Jason, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. It was very very interesting talking to
Yeah,
you.
no, thank you, Monica, and thank you so much for your support for the whole day.